This is BBC News, the headlines at 11 o'clock. Hello and a very good morning. You are watching BBC News, and a warm welcome as well to viewers joining us on BBC Two. Our main story here this morning: another round of army job cuts has just been announced by the Ministry of Defence. Most of those who have been made redundant so far have been volunteers, but this time a higher proportion are expected to be compulsory. And just to tell you that we're just hearing that there will be an urgent question in the Commons about this in the next hour or so, about 12:30 today.
Yes, we will bring that to you live, but the details of what has been announced, because this is the latest round of redundancies, it'll see 5,300 jobs lost. It's part of the government's plans to reduce the size of the regular army from 102,000 soldiers to 82,000 by 2017, a loss of 20,000 jobs.
Well, the Shadow Defence Secretary, Jim Murphy, says this is a dreadful day for members of the army and their families, particularly following the hostage crisis last week in Algeria.
Right, Jonathan, for now, thanks very much. And just to tell you, we'll be talking to the Assistant Chief of the General Staff.
Before we move on, news just through in connection with the phone hacking story, the continuing story. We are just hearing that the defence editor of The Sun newspaper is to be charged with conspiracy to commit misconduct in public office. That is Virginia Wheeler, the defence editor of The Sun, will be charged with conspiracy to commit misconduct in office.
Yes, along with Metropolitan Police Constable Paul Fatley. So that news after that long investigation, that detail coming through that the defence editor of The Sun is to be charged with conspiracy to commit misconduct in public office, along with Met Police Constable Paul Fatley. We'll bring you more on that in the next few minutes.
A court in Indonesia has sentenced a British woman to death for attempting to smuggle drugs into Bali. 56-year-old Lindsay Sandiford was convicted of carrying nearly 5 kilograms of cocaine in the lining of her suitcase on a flight from Bangkok last year. The Foreign Office says it strongly objects to the death penalty and will continue to provide consular assistance to Lindsay Sandiford and her family. Let's get the latest from our chief political correspondent, Norman Smith, because, Norman, there has been a surprise expressed actually in many quarters, not just by her legal team, about, well, what some people are saying is a disproportionate sentence.
Yeah, and I think that is giving some grounds for optimism within government that an appeals process could potentially be successful. But what I'm picking up is at the moment the government seem not inclined to get involved in this for the straightforward reason, they argue, that there is still a legal process to pursue. There are still 2 appeals she can make, one to the Supreme Court, and I understand a final appeal to the Indonesian president. She can ask for clemency, so there is still a legal avenue to go down. In the meantime, the view within government seems to be that it would be a mistake for the government to wade in and start making public protests and that sort of thing. Why? Because they think it would be interpreted as interfering in the legal affairs of another country, which would go down badly in Indonesia. More to the point, if British ministers were to start making quite sort of strong statements here, the fear is that would basically make it harder for the Indonesians to, as it were, perhaps arrange for a more lenient sentence. So the strategy at the moment seems a sort of softly one to allow Lindsay Sandiford to launch those appeals, see where the legal process goes, and then, pending the outcome of that, to decide whether the British government ought to take a more public role in this.
All right, thanks for now. Norman Smith, our chief political correspondent.
Let's turn to the weather, because as Britain spends a 5th day covered in snow and ice, local communities are pulling together to support vulnerable people. Postmen and women are being asked to check on elderly residents, while some local councils are appealing for volunteers to help them keep their pavements clear.